Dustin?
I was caught off guard. All right, so I thought we were just going to get an in look into Dylan's life. That's all I was looking
You know
for.
what? If that's what you need, I can provide that.
Yeah,
it is extremely glamorous.
Well, we're done. We're done with that. It's over. That's enough. That's enough, Dylan.
Well, we've had Northwestern play both Purdue and Indiana these past couple games.
Yep.
So what's interesting is a lot of people on both sides, the Purdue and Indiana side, have griped about the officiating, particularly the way Northwestern defended Trace Jackson Davis, the way they defended Zach Edey. What have been your thoughts? To me, that's probably how games are going to be played in the NCAA tournament, at least at some point.
Can't blame officiating on a loss. And I'm the first one to say that, even though I'm talking about some of this stuff today. They had many other opportunities
They did.
Yes.
But the thing to me is those two teams are going to have to figure out how to play through that, because at some point in the NCAA tournament, it's probably going to happen because you're going to have officials that haven't worked a game with TJD or Zach Edey.
You might draw Larry Serrato.
Or you could draw Larry Serrato, whatever the case might be. I don't want to say it was a lack of toughness from both of those teams, but it felt like there was a little bit of shell shock from both Purdue and Indiana.
Right. I think especially with those two players, they're so dominant that you've seen defenses try just about everything against them this year. And you kind of probably figured at this point late in the season, you've seen everything a defense can throw at you. And Northwestern then kind of did this thing where they would run two defenders at Trace Jackson Davis or Zach Edey, and they've seen that a bunch of times this year. But the different thing that Northwestern did was they ran both defenders at them, both of them big defenders, like 6'8" and bigger, and they got really, really tight up to them, put their hands in their face, and did not let them turn their shoulder to see the rest of the court and make the pass out of the double team. That was the difference, because they didn't do that against Trace in the first time Indiana played Northwestern. And so that's the strategy they used in both games. Matt Painter talked about it after the game against Purdue, where he said basically they stopped Zach Edey from turning his shoulder and surveying the court. So he had to throw some kick-out passes basically blind. And Zach Edey, had, as much as Painter complained about the officials and said they need to officiate better, and that is true, he said Edey needs to do a better job of surveying the court, and that was a significant issue in the game. I think that was a significant issue for Trace in the first half yesterday. I think he did a much better job with it, adjusting in the second half. He's going to have to do that going forward. And then in the NCAA tournament, because I think you're right, there is going to come a game in the NCAA tournament where officials are going to struggle to call the fouls against Zach Edey, against Trace Jackson Davis. Teams are going to see that tape, see that works, and try to take advantage of it. And Trace is going to have to be ready.
Yeah, and the second half, plus Indiana simply did not come out with the intensity they needed. We don't have the clip. We'll play it tomorrow or later. But Mike Woodson, he said something that I'm wondering if he really meant it the way it sounded. He said it seemed like Indiana came out too hyped. They were too hyped for the game. They didn't look hyped. I don't know. Did he really mean too overconfident? Is what I was wondering if he meant that by instead, because they did not look hyped to me. Northwestern looked hyped. They were playing, inspired defense, running around, while Indiana was like kind of on their heels a little bit, like, wait, what's so they didn't look high. I didn't see this hyped sensation that he talked about.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing, because he also said they came out feeling really good about this game. Maybe that's what you're talking about with the overconfidence. Because it hurt. They turned the ball over on their first two offensive possessions. And what Woodson's basic point was is in the early parts of the game, they were doing things that weren't either part of the game plan or what they were supposed to be doing. And whether it was because they were too charged up for the game or not charged up enough, the bottom line was that they were making mistakes and doing things that they were not supposed to be doing, making plays that they were not supposed to be making, and that cost them early in the game. Now, if you remember, they got off to a relatively good start in terms of the score. They were up 10-7, I think it was early. They had gotten a bunch of stops. Northwestern wasn't doing much on offense. And then it was kind of like a switch flipped in the middle of that first half where Northwestern just really locked down on defense. And they just started making a bunch of shots on offense. And once some shots started going in, Indiana really kind of backed off a little bit and kind of got discombobulated, to use the word that a lot of people used last night. And so basically it was that sometime in the middle of that first half, they seemed to kind of either run out of gas or just kind of the deer in headlights opened up a little bit. And it took them until the start of the second half to really get it fixed.
Well, I thought the turning point in that first half, and I think Northwestern was up by 4 or 5 at this point in the game, was that missed travel call and then the two, alleged missed travel call and then the 2 technical fouls. And it's interesting because earlier this week I listened to Matt Painter show, and he was asked about why doesn't he get on the officials more, and he said fans might want to see me get a technical or get tossed from a game, but that doesn't help Purdue. And he said something along the lines of basically, then I think our players start to think about the officiating. And I kind of think that's what happened with Indiana last night. I felt like for the rest of that half, Indiana got a little bit more concerned about what was being called, what wasn't being called on the floor, as opposed to just going out and playing. Because you're right, even though the officiating was hit and miss through those first, whatever it was, 8 to 10 minutes, Indiana was fine. They were in good position. To be on the road, to just be down a couple points against a really good Northwestern team, that's right where you want to be. And then the 2 technicals happened, and it's like, completely swung the game. And so to me, I felt like they were able to regroup at halftime, obviously, to outscore them by 17 points, overcome that 21-point deficit. But I felt like that at some point, again, that's one of those things where when you're on the road, things aren't going your way. They just didn't have that mental toughness for that last 10-minute stretch of the first half.
Yeah, it's interesting what Painter said, to be clear, because you talk about, it doesn't help Purdue. And there are some times, to be clear, where a coach getting a technical foul can really inspire his team to kind of give up the 2 points. And that was not what happened against Northwestern.
Right.
Indiana, when Mike Woodson was not trying to get that technical foul, he was trying to get an explanation from the official for the first technical foul that had been called on the Indiana bench, which that's the one you can kind of talk a little bit about the officiating. It's like, okay, should you have some rabbit ears? We don't know what was said from the bench. Maybe it was something egregious. We don't know. But they
probably a job offer to be a police chief somewhere.
They were protesting the travel call. And then Mike Woodson went to get an explanation. He brushes the official. You can't do that. That's an automatic technical. And so obviously it was not one of those times where he was really trying to get after the official to inspire his team. And you're right. I think it did kind of put Indiana a little bit behind the 8 ball for the rest of the half. And then they probably went into halftime. He said what he said after the game, which is, look, guys, those 4 points are on me. Don't worry about it. Let's get back out there and do what we were doing at the start of the game. Figure out how to deal with this Northwestern defense and just play basketball. And that's what they did for the entire second half. To come back from 19 down. And it was good to see the bounce back a little bit. I do think it's another example of Woodson being able to make some second half adjustments, which we've actually seen a fair amount here in recent games. He's pretty good at that. But yeah, it did. There was that 10-minute stretch after the technical where it spiraled for Indiana a little bit.
And again, as bad as Larry Schrodo is, he's not what cost Indiana this game. The push off at the end, the very obvious push off at the end of the game, is not what lost the game for Indiana. I can give you some very quick numbers that will lighten your eyes up. First of all, just go to the free throw line. Well, you'll see Northwestern was a perfect 14 of 14. Did not miss a free throw. Indiana, however, left 5 points on the board.
Not only that, but several of those were missed front ends of 1-and-1, so it was more than that.
Yes. You know what? And I forgot about that. Yes. They could have easily won this game by 10 at the free throw line alone.
No, they wouldn't have won it by 10.
I'm just saying they left a lot of points on board, because then you look at turnovers where Indiana had 13-6.
Yeah.
They didn't lose a lot on points off of turnovers, because Northwestern only scores 4, but it's the lost opportunities of scoring again. So now you've got another, say you score on half of those, that's another 14 points. So we're looking at several points here, people. A lot of points left on the board.
With the turnovers, especially because the second half, the turnovers continued into the second half. They weren't quite as frequent as they were in the first half, but they continued into the second half, and they were costing Indiana pretty significantly because basically Indiana shot 67% in the second half. Like basically, if they were putting up a shot in the second half, they were scoring. And so the turnovers cost you even more points when you're shooting well because you're not getting up a shot. You're not giving yourself a chance. And so Northwestern was the entire night at getting in passing lanes and getting tips and forcing Indiana to be stronger with the ball. And there were just times where they just weren't strong enough with the basketball. And those times they threw it out of bounds, those cost you a lot of points. And so this was a winnable game for Indiana that, again, you're right, Jim, that the officiating was not the difference here. It was the turnovers. It was the missed free throws. The officiating is annoying to watch, but it's not what cost Indiana this game.